you are just joining us on Facebook, I am Lauren from RDU on Stage, and I am with NC State University Theater's Rachel Klem, and you are directing a show I'm really looking forward to next season, Head Over Heels. So
Yeah.
I want to talk about that. And as always, if you have any questions or comments as we're talking, just post them in the Facebook comments section and I will see them. And I'm just making sure we're actually live. I think we are, but I will confirm that on my phone and we'll go from there. Oh, I love technology. I can't wait to do live interviews again,
It's
Rachel.
great. It's great. I have a little red life in my corner of my screen.
Yeah, we are live now. So that's
Yay!
yay. Okay. So Rachel, I want to ask you first a little bit about you. I saw that you studied theater. You went to school in Chicago. Is that where you're from? Are you from Illinois?
No, I grew up in Colorado. I grew up in Colorado, and then I got my undergraduate degree in California at San Francisco State University. And then I went to Chicago for my graduate degree and stayed there for about 7 years before moving here to the Triangle.
Do you find so what I find interesting about this is that you've done theater on the West Coast. You've been exposed to theater in the Midwest. I mean, although Chicago's a real big metropolitan city, and now you're making theater here in the, I want to say South-ish, because I don't really think of us as the South, but we'll just say South-ish.
Okay.
Do you see a difference between theater in different regions of the United States?
Yeah, I do. I do. I think that, I mean, I definitely feel like theater in California is more progressive. It tends to be more political and just really, just even, the the way we see casting sort of change and the way people are willing to approach casting and be a little more um, experimental with casting. I mean, that started way back 30 years ago when I was in California. And then I sort of saw it. I came to Chicago. Chicago's interesting because Chicago has, for me, has always had a sort of a segregated feel, not only in the neighborhoods, but in the theater world. So you see people who are kind of doing their own thing and being really into their own thing. But you have a lot of Black theater companies or a lot of Latino theater companies, but so it's sort of very specialized. And then you come to the South, and the South, in my experience, is relatively traditional in in their theater tastes. And so hopefully, what I hope is that I've brought a little bit of progressiveness with me, that I tend to cast a little bit radically. Um, and I tend to pick shows I think that might be a little bit out of the box. Although working at State, we're a relatively traditional company, but I think that we're really breaking out of that. And we're working towards we want to be a very progressive company. So, yeah.
Well, and I think we were talking before we went online, and I had mentioned to a bunch of you at NC State last week. I think some of the casting choices, some of the material choices that I've seen at university theater, and I can just speak from Bright Star on, has been very progressive, and that's what I like about it. It's on par, in my opinion, with any community, any other theater in this area. If people haven't gone to university theater, they have to, because there's some really good work being done there.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. I agree. And I think a lot of times people are a little bit biased against student theater, and I say this all the time, but it's really very, very true that our students, because they're not majors, we've talked about this before, we were just talking about this too. Our students can get a minor in theater, but they're not majors. So when they come to our program, it's because it's something they really need. It's something they're really passionate about. It's not something that's prescriptive for them. They don't have to take a theater class. They don't have to be in a show. So they're their heart and their passion is so amazing, and just they make it really worthwhile. It's an amazing program for sure.
I know you've written a lot of plays as well, and a lot of plays for young audiences. Do you think writing makes you a better director, or that being a director makes you a better playwright?
I really don't think of myself as a playwright at all. I have, it's funny because I've written probably, I've adapted a lot of things, and I've written maybe a handful of plays, but I always write sort of collaboratively too.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm actually in the process of adapting something right now, and I just feel like I'm a really good editor. And I think that does come from directing. I think that they're really similar. In fact, I had a friend who got her master's in directing and then went straight into TV editing. And she said it's almost exactly the same thing. It's really just about, thinking about the shot and then thinking about when to move on from the next to the next event. So yeah.
It's funny, I was talking to another director who was directing a play over at Interact, and there were some strange transitions in that play. And when I sat down with the director to talk to her about it, she said the playwright didn't think about costume changes. The playwright didn't think about these transitions that had to happen. And so that's why I think it's interesting when you have kind of experience in cross disciplines, you can think about those things,
Oh,
not
definitely.
just.
Yeah. Yeah, that does help a lot when, especially if you're devising theater, to think about those kind of things for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. And like all colleges, NC State has had to pivot to online learning. So can you talk to me about the challenges of teaching theater and trying to help run a theater program online when you don't have the benefit of working with your colleagues in person or the students in person?
Well, and even harder than that is just not knowing. I mean, no one knows what's coming next. No one knows what to expect. No one knows what the right decisions are. I mean, we're struggling right now with the idea of um, I truly feel like I can't that an acting class. I teach acting, right? The art of acting a lot, and I truly feel like an online acting class is not going to give you the same skills or even the skills necessary for acting. Acting is such a in-person, or person-to-person thing. I mean, my belief is that acting is about communicating with another person. It's a cycle of communication, right? I say something, you say something, when we're responding off of each other constantly. But when you have problems with like a blip in your Zoom all of a sudden, you're trying to communicate, or you're trying to talk at the same time and you can't because one of it's so it's I did teach um, a class last semester where the students had to do a partner scene with each other from Almost Maine, which is up and coming for NC State, and it wasn't bad. The students did a great job, and the output wasn't bad, but it's not the same. It's really not. Theater is about being in the same room with other people. Acting is about being moment to moment with each other. And the technology just doesn't allow for that. So we're right now trying to decide whether we can have classes next semester, or whether, just to take a semester off for those acting classes. We can do our study classes like Introduction to Theater online, but the acting classes, as good as people are trying to make them, and as good as we can be, they just still aren't. They're just not the same. So it's
Are,
hard.
I guess there's a lot of debate right now as to whether these virtual experiences and these virtual live streams that we're seeing are theater. Do you think, as a theater maker, that all of these virtual things are theater, or are they just creatively their own thing, and we should take them as that.
Yeah, I think for me, definition of theater means that the audience is in the same space with the people, with the performers. So that's for me, that's just the definition of theater. I think people are creating amazing dramatic events and create incredible, um, I would say, yeah, dramatic events, filmic events, you know, screen events, digital events, but you know, theaters in the same room. So that's just my definition. But I think people are doing amazing things, and I think they're using their brains. I mean, the creative brains that are being poured into this problem are just incredible, just amazing stuff. Yeah.
And you said you were working on an adaptation of something. I'm wondering what your in your experience and with the experience with the students, is this a time, this kind of weird time of quarantine and isolation, is this a time that hinders our creativity and nurtures it, or you know, where are we creatively in this weird space, or has it changed throughout the course of this pandemic, because now we're going on what, 3 months?
Right. I'm sorry, I got a little tickle in my throat. So I think that pause, please.
Do you want to take a minute to get a drink? I can show my head over heels video to folks while you.
I think that's a good idea just because it's a little tickle and it's going to keep going. I have water right here, but show the video. Let
Okay.
me recover. That's a great idea.
All right. So I'm going to share with everyone a video. This is from the Broadway production of Head Over Heels. I'm hoping I can share this effectively with everybody. Um, and this was a preview they used for the show, which I think is the best explanation, much better than what I could explain. It's not your average fairy tale at Head Over Heels. The damsels are not in distress. The hero is not a knight in shining armor. And once upon a time is right now. They don't know where they want to go, but they're walking in time. It's the Broadway musical critics are calling funny, sexy, and delightfully entertaining. So get up and go and get tickets to Head Over Heels, featuring the songs of the Go-Go's. It's not your average fairy. Okay, so I'm not sure I did this screen share right. Again, gotta love technology. I am going to try again in a couple of minutes. Rachel, are you doing better?
I just got done of the coffee. Whew.
Okay, good. So I will try to find that video, but I guess to go back to my last question before we show this video, or before I try to show the video again, um, does, from what you're seeing in your experience and from the experience with the students, is this a time that is nurturing or hindering our creativity?
I think, I feel like, I feel like, I feel like our creativity is at an all-time high. I think what happens a lot of the times is when you're sort of in a crisis situation, you're forced. And I think that I kind of think of directing as being in a kind of a constant crisis situation where you you're moving along and you get hit with some sort of obstacle, and the director's creative brain has to find a way to go around that obstacle. And I think because I think the pandemic is pushing creative people into, by necessity, being extraordinarily creative. Lots of creativity. Is it easy? No, it's really hard. It's exhausting. I mean, the same thing that everybody's facing, no matter what people do. It's just it's just a difficult time period for everyone. But I think that I've found the amount of creative output that I've had to do is very, very great, um, and very stimulating, but really tiring for sure.
Definitely ebbs and flows. I have days when I wake up and I feel like I'm all over it, and other days I just wake up and I feel like I just don't want to get out of bed. So I think we're all kind of there. Our sleep patterns, everything is just
Right,
skewed right.
right. I feel like I can work. I work on this creative stuff. I work for like 4 hours straight, and it's manic and it's crazy, and then I crash. So that's kind of, yeah, how it feels for sure. Yeah.
Totally agree. Okay, so now I'm going to try to show this video. Hopefully it will work this time. Um, but I think we've got it. So let's see if it's going to work on me.
It's not your average fairy tale at head over heels. The damsels are not in distress. The hero is not a knight in shining armor. And once upon a time is right now. They don't know where they want to go, but they're walking in time. It's the Broadway musical critics are calling funny, sexy, and delightfully entertaining. So get up and go and get tickets to Head Over Heels, featuring the songs of the Go-Go's.
Were you able to see that, Rachel? I hope people were able to see it.
Yeah, I
Um,
definitely thought.
I think from what I'm seeing on Facebook that people did get to see it. It might have been a little choppy, but the only way I can describe this show is think of like something rotten, kind of this Victorian piece fairy tale meets the Go-Go's. Set to Go-Go's music. It's all in this rhythmic language. How would you describe the show?
Well, the show, they took they took an epic poem from the 13th century, or maybe it was the 15th century. I always get that mixed up. But they took this epic poem and and then just married it with the go-go songs. So this epic poem, yes, it's in verse. It's it's it was a brother, an older brother, wrote it for his young sister as bedtime stories, but it was set in this imaginary land of Arcadia, and it was just these very sweet stories of lovers finding each other and traipsing through the forest and wandering, going to find things, and it has this epic poem of sort of being circular, and no one really gets anywhere, no one does anything. But yeah, that's how I think of it, as being this very sweet sort of fairy tale story mixed in with the Go-Go's music, which I think supports it really well. I think they go together very well.
And the whole thing is it's not a sung through musical. So the songs there is dialogue along with the music, but all of the dialogue is in iambic pentameter. Am I correct in that? It's all
I
verse.
haven't checked to see if it's iambic pentameter. I know it's in verse. I don't know what the verse is.
It's all I want to say it. I don't know, but it's all in verse. It's all and that's what makes it so fun. Um I did see this show on Broadway. I was telling you before we went on, a fellow critic of mine who was freelancing for the Chicago Tribune and is now the editor of the Chicago Reader. And my aunt and I went to see this show, and it was, I think I smiled ear to ear for 2+ hours. It's joyful and it's comedy, but it's comedy with a point. Um, Bonnie Milligan, who originated the role of Princess Pamela, and it was one of the most extraordinary performances I had seen. She said about this show, we're representing people on stage who have never seen themselves on stage before. So when you start thinking about casting, because that was one of the things that made this show so interesting. There was a transgender performer. She was the first transgender actress to originate a Broadway role. Bonnie was the beautiful princess in this show, but she's not a traditional looking princess figure. I think she's beautiful, but she's not a Disney princess. Let's just leave. And so, when you're casting this show, what will be some of the things that you're thinking about?
Um, I whenever I cast a show, it's always my goal to put who I think is the best actor for the role into the part. And I challenge myself to look beyond what I think, what the first thing that comes to my mind. So I'm just going to cast the person who can sing the role the best, who can act the best, who can who there's some I'm also known for playing with gender a lot. So maybe a traditionally male character, I'll throw a female identified person in there. I just unless the script tells me it has to be this kind of person, then I try not to think that way. This play, there are particular stories that are being told. There is a story between two women being in love. Now, I'm not going to play with that. I'm not going to put a man in there and change the intent of the story. The character that Peppermint played. What is her name? Physio. Do you remember her name? I have this written down. I have some notes over here just in case I need to look.
She's one of the goddesses. She's like kind of this interesting or seer of the future.
Right. Pythio. Pythio is
Yes.
She is the physical mother of a character in the play. So you start as a director, you start to say to yourself, well, do I have to have a person who has a female body so that we have to make sense of the fact that she gave birth to someone at some point? And for me, those questions don't matter that much. They don't matter that much. I really, I don't want to mess with the intent of a play ever, but beyond that, it comes down to the best person for the role and the person who fits the role the right way. Yeah, for me.
I I loved Bright Star. We've talked about Bright Star, but I think some of the casting decisions you made in that show actually enhanced the narrative. I'm not sure I would have liked the show as much had I seen it with an all white cast. I'm not even sure the show would have made a whole lot of sense to me if I had seen it. It wouldn't have certainly been as impactful if I had seen it with an all white cast. Do you think making these color conscious decisions when it comes to casting enhances the narrative? Are you thinking about that when you make casting choices?
Yes, absolutely. Um, when I was casting Bright Star, I had lunch with Carly Prentice Jones and talked over the idea of casting Alice with African American heritage female. And she and I both agreed. I read through it and I agreed if Alice was African American, it raised the stakes of this story, right? A Black woman in love with a white man who's the mayor's son, and she gets pregnant, and that's even, that for me, that raised the stakes. And it made sense to me to raise the stakes. The choice I made about casting that show was more about sort of I had a rebellious moment. I had read the show. I loved it. I thought it was great for the community of Raleigh. And then once I picked it, once we all talked about it at NC State and picked it, um, I was told it was a white person show, and it never even occurred to me. It never even, and because I'm a little naive in that way, right? Um, so when I found that, then I started pursuing the idea of, well, I felt rebellious. I felt like, how dare someone write a play about my state and make it an all white event? Because there's nothing about North Carolina that is all white to me. It's a very diverse state. It's, you know, and so for me that just didn't it. So I rebelled and I said, I'm not doing it that way. I'm going to start making sure that I don't do it that way. But then I did think through: does it make sense to have a black woman in this part? For me, yes, it did. Um, does it make sense to split the roles so that I have an older actor playing the older character and a younger actor playing the younger characters? And that made sense to me too. And I felt like I could justify and support that. So yes, some of it is just pure, I'm going to do what I want. But I do, if you call it color conscious, that means yes, we're really, whoever's making those choices is really thinking about it, and not doing it to tokenize people, not to do it just to have black folks in the show, but to justify it, to make a reason for it. Yeah, that's what I try to do.
And I call it color conscious casting. I've had a few conversations with Patrick Torres about this, and he's the one who really made me aware of the term color conscious casting, because his feeling is there is no such thing as colorblind casting. So I guess, can we talk about the difference between colorblind casting and color conscious casting for those folks watching? Because there is a little bit of a difference, I think.
Sure. I mean, my interpretation is that colorblind casting means that you don't see. It's sort of that phrase that some people say, "I don't see color." Well, everyone sees color, and we live in America, which actually sees color very, um, with a lot of bias. So, so to say colorblind is sort of disingenuous. It's not really quite honest, because you're lying to yourself. Right? So and when you put actors in front of the audience, it's not a blind audience either. The audience isn't a colorblind audience. So color conscious is, yeah, is the idea that you think really hard about the choices that you're going to make, how, what the impact they have on the story, what impact they have on the audience, what impact they have on the actors themselves. We've had a couple of conversations recently about when you put an actor of color into a traditionally white role, what kind of what kind of um, what kind of cultural, burden are they carrying when you do that, right? And how do they have to deal with the way that the audience responds? As you know, there was a review about Bright Star that wasn't supportive of the idea of putting black folks in those parts, and um, the actors had to bear that. They had to bear the criticism of that. And so I think you have to take all that into consideration, and that's where your consciousness comes from. Um, I and I don't do it by myself. I really do ask my colleagues. I ask my friends. I go to people of color and ask them, help me out here, because the last thing I want to do is put a person of color, or any person, in a tough spot, where they don't feel like their personhood is being represented and or cared for. If there's no care in it, so that's really, yeah, that's a very important thing, I think, right now in theater.
And you mentioned the criticism over Bright Star, and I actually found that particular critique of Bright Star really interesting, because I felt completely the opposite of what he had written. And that's fine. That's why there's multiple reviewers in this area, because we all have our own opinions.
Right.
But I guess a question for me, and this is a question I've grappled with RDU on stage. Theater Fest is a little bit different because those auditions are open to the community. So you have students and non students involved in those productions. But
Right.
when it comes to a show like Ragtime or like Head Over Heels, which are part of the university theater season, how important is theater criticism, or is there a place for theater criticism in critiquing college productions? And I asked that because this is something I've grappled with. On the one hand, I think the kids are learning their craft, they're honing their craft. This should be a safe space for them to experiment. And then on the other hand, if they want to go into this business, then they should be open to criticism. But I guess my question is there a place for theater criticism at the college level?
Sure. That's a great question. I mean, I think that's a really great question. No one, I think we talked about right before we started, I've been at NC State for 15 or 17 years. I'm not even quite sure at this point. I've been there a long time, and we never got reviewers. We actually, no one would come, and no one came to review our shows. Even Theater Fest, which is our summer program with the community actors, we were just sort of out of the blip of reviewers. I know that reviewers have limited space, they have limited shows they can go and see, and there's so much to see. And it was a shift for me because I had been doing a lot of theater in the area and getting reviewed a lot. So a lot of my work had been reviewed, and I was quite used to it. You know, you have to, no matter where you are, you have to build up a thick skin with reviews. Um, so when I was in college, I was getting reviews. I was used to it. I was young. I would get really upset. Oh man, when you get a bad review, oh, you get so upset. And you talk about how that person doesn't know anything. You get a great review, and they're, then they're obviously the smartest people on the planet, and they got it and all that. And I do think all young performers have to learn, all young artists have to learn how to deal with criticism. So for me, it made sense when I was in a majors program to get that kind of feedback. And and for a long time at NC State, we didn't have reviewers come. They've just started coming, and it's a really interesting experience as someone who got a lot of professional feedback, to get feedback for the students. So I always say to the students, I always go to them and say, okay, look, there's going to be a review about the show. I don't tell people when the reviewer's in the audience. I don't like to know when there's a reviewer in the audience. So I don't tell the students. So I say, here's the thing about reviews. It's one person's opinion. They may be smart people. They may have a lot of experience with theater, but it's one person's opinion. And so you have a choice here. You can either take that person's opinion to heart, and that means whether it's a bad review. I mean, if it's a bad review, you have to believe it. And then if it's a good review, you have to believe it too. So no, it's better to explain it the way. If it's a good review, yes, you get to take it to heart. If it's a bad review and you're going to take the other one to heart, you have to take the bad review to heart too. So my advice is just take it or leave it. If it's it's one person's opinion, and I tell my actors that their opinion is what really matters. If they think they're doing a good job, if they think they're doing the best they can do, if they think the directors made great choices, then who cares what's said on paper? But we do care. I mean, we do care. It matters to us. I respect reviewers' opinions, and you take it, you leave it.
Well, and I think the way we word our reviews is really important. I always point to Ben Brantley's review of Head Over Heels when I talk to people about why theater criticism language is important. Because when he wrote about this particular show, he marginalized women and the entire non-binary community. He really just and he got in trouble for it. There was a big outlash from the theater community about his words. He questioned the casting of Bonnie Milligan as a beautiful princess because she is a plus size person. I would challenge any person who isn't plus size to do some of the things she did physically on that stage because it was a very physically demanding role.
Yeah,
Uh, she has breath control like I've never seen in another performer. Um, so I think the way we phrase the words we use, there's a difference between being constructive and being mean.
for
And
sure.
always point to that review when I'm speaking to people about theater criticism because a lot of his feedback about the show wasn't constructive. It was just mean or um, ignorant or maybe for the sake of being shocked. I think some people write for the shock value of it. And so I don't know where his mindset was, but I think as critics, we have to be mindful of our language.
Well, I think particularly in this day and age that, especially if you're going to see a play about being progressive, which is what this play is about, right? This play is about change, and this play is about um, dropping tradition. If you go into a review where you're going to try and stick to your traditional guns, you're gonna you're gonna be in trouble. Theaters, I think. Oh boy, I almost said so. Theater is a place where we can really push progressivism, right? I mean, we can really push the envelope, and we do, and a lot of stories do. But there's also a huge amount of systemic. Um, I mean, it's an institution, right? So there's a whole bunch of systemic bias and racism and sexism, inherent in the structure of theater, that hopefully we're looking to tear down that institution as well, and keep. I think as a theater artist, I want to always be pushing towards progress, always pushing the envelope of what how people see themselves and what we accept uh, as American, or anything, Yeah.
And I wonder, this play is a comedy. It is joyful, it is fun. The music is fantastic. I grew up, I mean, the Go Go's, that's the soundtrack of my youth.
Right.
And so when I hear those songs, it just takes me back to this really happy place. But I wonder when you are presenting progressive material, is it easier to present that material packaged in a comedy versus a drama?
Probably not. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think that I don't know. I feel like this is gonna wrinkle some. This show is gonna wrinkle some feathers in our community. We have a very traditional subscriber base, and we get letters. We get letters. We get letters about our gay agenda. We get letters about using the F word. We get letters about casting outside of the way people think we should cast. Yeah, we get letters. And I don't know that comedy, for those type of people who feel like who want their theater in a very particular package, I don't know that comedy makes the difference for them. We'll see. We'll see what kind of letters we get for Head Over Heels, but we will get some.
I imagine so. And I guess I wonder, do you have to put any? There were no disclaimers on this show when I went to see it. There were a lot of families in the audience. The show is about a family, this royal family that is facing a crisis of sorts. That's where Pythia or Peppermint's character comes in. She kind of foreshadows that if this family doesn't face some issues and face change that the entire regime will fall. But I guess I'm wondering on a regional level, and this will be the regional premiere, I think, of this show. What do you have to have any kind of disclaimer on a show like this? There's no nudity in this show, but there's a lot of sexual innuendo in this show.
So we put content warnings on our shows that tend to say things like sexual content or adult language or strobe light or I think very generally. We went through this a little a conversation last year because there's something that people something that's like relatively new is this idea of a trigger warning that happens in shows. So trigger warning is relatively new, but the students are particularly sensitive to that kind of language or knowing. They want to know. So yeah, we do. We put a little bit of warning. Are we going to, I don't think we'll put specifically like, non-hetero behavior on stage or anything like that. But we will probably say adult or sexual content or adult. I don't even think there's adult language because I don't think there's any cussing or anything like that. So.
I don't remember language. I mean, there's a lot of sexual innuendo. It is like one of those traditional um, Shakespearean comedies where there's kind of this, gender swapping and miscommunication, misunderstandings, which is really funny, which is part of the comedy of the show. But I don't remember language in it. I just remember sexual content.
I don't think so. And I think with innuendo, especially with kids, there's a little bit of room because innuendo is hard for them to catch. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a very sweet, very clean, very wonderful show. But again, I'm pretty progressive. And for me, if there's a gay character in a play, that's not even something I pick up over. That's like, of course there is. I mean, it's theater, I don't know. We're progressive.
When you make I guess another question I have is when you're looking at a catalog of shows that you're picking from for the following season, uh, what where is the mindset about picking a show like Head Over Heels? I mean, this is a very gender fluid. This is what I'm going to say about it. It is a very gender fluid show. This is the most gender fluid show I think I've seen on a stage in a long time. In the way it's celebrated and just it's very inclusive. So I guess when you're making your season decisions, knowing your subscriber base, knowing the content of some of these shows, where do you make the decision to push the envelope or not?
That's a good question. I don't think I have an answer. This show, though, Head Over Heels was picked by the students. So last year or the year before, we set up a new process where we allow the students to pick the musicals. So we come to the season selection committee comes to the students with 5 plays, and we give them those 5 musicals, and then they set up a committee and they read them and they listen to the music, and then they come together and they decide. So they chose Head Over Heels, which makes sense because our students are very progressive. I mean, young people are always so forward thinking, and our students are very societally conscious. So makes sense that they would pick this show. In fact, I think I had read it, but only 3/4 of the way through when I found out it was picked. So, so I hadn't even finished reading it before I was assigned to it. I think, I think with us, I think we all struggle when we're picking shows between our audience base, the artists who are going to create it. So for us, that's our staff, but also our students. We're always sort of struggling between that. We have been a relatively commercial theater, and university theater sells tickets. I mean, we sell tickets, which a lot of people, which we're very lucky about. A lot of people have trouble doing that. Um, and we are pushing to choose shows that are less traditional. We have a new director, and Josh Reeves, and he's encouraging us to, yeah, which is wonderful. And he's a very young man, and he's encouraging us to, really break out of a box that we feel like that university theater has been in. It's not the biggest, it's not the tightest box, but it's been a relatively narrow type of in our season selection, and we're just really trying to break out of that and make a lot of really new, exciting decisions. Part of that is letting the students pick shows because it's their theater, and we want to do what they want to do. So we push boundaries, but I would not say we do have uh, some places we won't go. I remember one show that we were looking at that is very popular. It's actually getting a lot of play throughout the country, but our our group felt like it was a little too sexual for what we do, so we didn't pick it.
Can you make color conscious casting decisions and play selections, musical selections? Do you have are our regional stages and our colleges able to make bolder decisions than our mainstream stages?
I don't know. I don't know. I think it's to me in my experience with picking plays in season selection, it's so individual for every company. It really is what they're into and what they want to push forward. I'm hoping as we push forward with university theater that we can, because we have a student body and because we have a student body that is very socially conscious and socially active. I'm hoping that we can start to tell the stories. We're telling more, and I'm hoping that we can keep continue doing this, telling the stories they want to tell, as opposed to the stories that our audience wants to see. But it's
Hmm.
always walking that fine line between the two. We don't want to lose. We don't want to go. We want to sell tickets. We do want to sell tickets, but I think primarily we serve the students. So we're really walking that tightrope right now. We are really, all these questions you're asking are great questions that we are actively talking about and figuring out right now. So
Well, and I wonder too, I posed this question to Vivian Benish because when I interviewed her the first time, I saw Chapel Hill really as a community in crisis. There were taking down of statues. There was a firing of a basketball coach. There would seem to be a lot of discussion about race issues. I haven't seen or heard that as much on the NC State campus, but I guess I wonder from an academic theater point of view, what role does the theater have in bringing a community together, especially in a school community, like a university community together, um, or healing a community that is in crisis?
well, it's hard to heal when we can't get together, of course. Um, I think that it's absolutely imperative for theater to be part of the healing force, and a mirror to society. I think that you know that we have to expose inequities for what, that's a big part of it, exposing inequities and talking about them and creating stories, creating theater, that creating ways to communicate that to people. Um, Absolutely, theater is so important in all of that.
Mhm.
And it's still so hard. It's still so hard to open up those conversations and have them and move forward. And but we have to. I always tell everybody I feel like I'm in the mental health profession. That I'm here. I'm here not only to tell stories for the public, but also I'm here for the students to have a place where they can really explore that internal side of themselves. They're out becoming engineers and veterinarians and scientists because we're working at a STEM school, but then they come because they know that people have to have a heart and they have to have a place to be able to use their voice and to hear each other. And, um, I think it's a very powerful space.
I totally agree. Do
Mhm.
you have a favorite go-go song? Have you been listening to the soundtrack of this show, or are you just diving into the book at this point?
I haven't listened to the music very much at all. I mean, I know. So one of the things that really struck me is I was listening through to it, and I didn't listen to the soundtrack. I listened to the actual go-go songs as I was going through. Um, I don't. I really only know a few go-go songs really well. Just what was on the radio, and the stuff that's in there that wasn't on the radio is a new, exciting unearthing of music for me. I love the Go-Go's. I think "Mad About You," which isn't that a Belinda Carlisle song? No, that's not really Go-Go's, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. "Mad About You." I love that song in the show. Head Over Heels has always been one of my favorite songs, and of course, it's the title of the musical. Whenever you're working on a musical, if there's a musical title, you just sing it in your head all the time. So Head Over Heels is constantly going in my mind. Um, and then, of course, I love Vacation, and my very good friend Jeffrey Moore, who you know from being in Trailer Park Christmas with me, the Trailer Park Christmas. Yes, he plays my mother, Mima Hussey. Jeffrey Moore is a huge Go-Go's fan, a huge Go-Go's fan. He has a whole collection of all their posters and everything. But when we did a trailer park one year, we took Vacation, and one of the storylines was that Mima had written the song Vacation. Mima had written that song, and the Go-Go's had stolen it from her. And it was originally called Paid Time Off, though. So instead of Vacation, it was Paid Time Off. So whenever I hear Vacation, I always sing Paid Time Off instead.
So funny, so funny. And there are so many really funny moments around these songs in this show. I don't think people are going to think about these songs in the same context again
Right.
after they see this show, which is fun. It's rediscovering the music.
Well, that's what you would hope. I think that's what you hope for when you're doing a show with well-known music that's not written specifically for the show. And these jukebox shows is that people will have a new relationship to it.
Well, and my my feeling about jukebox musicals is very mixed. I'm really not a fan of the bio musicals. I'm really not a fan of the jukebox musicals that just have this catalog or playbook. And if I have to see Jersey Boys one more time, I really liked Jersey Boys the first couple times I saw it, but I'm over it now. The last time I saw it, I remember saying to my mom who went with me, like, I'm just over it. So I appreciate musicals like Head Over Heels, which are trying to reinvent this jukebox genre and not stick to the bio musical formulaic thing. Jagged Little Pill did that too, and I think Jagged Little Pill did it very successfully. So I'm excited to see where this jukebox genre goes next. I think
Yeah.
we're going to get away. I hope we're going to get away from these.
Well, I think that Head Over Heels is really great because it wasn't just how can we write scenes that will tie these songs together. It's almost like actually that the Arcadia stories are stronger, not stronger than the music, but were strong enough to stand on their own so that the music became something that lifted that part. As a lot of times you see that the songs are there to lift the script that happens in between. It's like this script is strong, and then the songs lift it up even more. Right. I'm sorry, I have some
And
crazy dog playing in the background.
that's okay. The book is very strong on this one, and when we end, I will share another video with the cast of the Broadway cast talking about kind of what this show meant to them. There were a lot of amazing people: Peppermint, Bonnie Milligan, Rachel York. There were some amazing people in this cast, amazing performances. So I can't wait to revisit it next season at University Theater.
I can't wait to start and dive into it. It's just going to be such a fun show. As you kept calling it pure joy. I have a friend who refers to these kind of shows, and this is with all the love in his heart. He refers to them as dumb fun. It's dumb fun.
You know,
Which it isn't.
I would
This one has a little more thought to that, but it is fun.
I was going to say this one feels like dumb fun as you're going through it because it is quirky and ridiculous and it's fantasy and it's this crazy fairy tale. But I found myself thinking about the themes after I left the theater. It's one of these shows that hit you kind of afterwards and you go, oh, wow, that was really progressive and interesting.
Yeah.
So
And it doesn't happen until about three-quarters of the way through. You think you're just sort of, yeah, flitting around, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, wait a minute, this is about something deeper than just vacation time and um,
yeah.
kissing in the bushes.
Yes. Well, I can't, like I said, I can't wait to revisit it. I really enjoyed it on Broadway. It was a joy fest.
Yay.
I hope people will give it a chance and come and see it and buy tickets for it, and have an open mind. I think it's one of these shows that can open hearts and minds and entertain at the same time.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
thank you so much for hanging out with me on a Friday night, talking about the Go Go's and this wonderful music. I did share the cast album on my Spotify story, or on, I created a Spotify playlist. I shared the Spotify playlist of the cast album on my Instagram story. So you can go there and listen to the music. It's a great way to kick off the weekend.
Absolutely. Thanks,
uh,
Lauren.
Thank you. And tomorrow night, Jeremy Kloss will be talking to another University Theater wonderful designer, Laura Parker. She does some amazing costumes for the University Theater.
Brilliant. She's brilliant. Yes.
And so I cannot wait to hear their conversation. Jeremy works in costumes as well at Raleigh Little Theater, so it'll be a lot of shop talk, and I can't wait to hear that conversation. So join us tomorrow. I'll post the time. My calendar is on the other side of the room, but it's tomorrow night. So come back tomorrow night on Facebook Live to hear Jeremy.
It was at 7 tomorrow night.
Thank you. I was like, some of these are at 7, some of them are at 7:30. That one's at 7. So come back tomorrow at 7 o'clock right here on Facebook Live. Thank you again, Rachel. And I'm going to close us out by sharing some interviews, not my interviews, but the Head Over Heels Broadway cast did some interviews talking about the meaning behind the show. And so I do want to end with that. And I will see you all tomorrow night. Thank you again, Rachel.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye. And just bear with me again while I try to figure out how to share my screen.
Head over heels presents a kind of utopian society where love and authenticity reigns.
There aren't many musicals, movies, anything that has such a welcome environment for anyone and everyone, and that is a celebration from beginning to end.
We're representing so many people on a Broadway stage that have never seen themselves before, and it feels like an important duty that we like get to have. It's a family show. It's a family idea of humanity, and that's what I think is so important right now.
It's very timely, and it feels great that I can talk to people who've seen the show after they've seen it, and just see them wake up and be so pleasantly surprised with the content of the show and how relevant it is.
My belief has always been that you cannot hate and fear what you understand. And one way of understanding people different than yourself is to see them and hear them tell their stories.
This show, for me, opened my eyes to the fact that, yes, I've known I've been a gay man for my whole life. And yes, I've been out for at least a decade of my life. But I realized through this show that I wasn't expressing all my colors, all my nuance as an individual.
I get to be a Black princess, and I love it. I love it. And to say to other people in the audience who thought this wasn't beautiful, like Pamela is a person that people maybe in this society wouldn't typically categorize as beautiful, but in this time and space, she is. And so like I would never trade that moment in the world. And I think a lot of people identify with that.
It feels so great to be a part of something that includes drag. It includes, a little bit of sass, obviously some dancing, gorgeous lighting, gorgeous makeup, and, gets to kind of clap back at a king.
In my experience of the people who come to see the show from all different walks of life, all different parts of the country and the world, even when I think maybe this is a little bit too progressive for them, I'm amazed at how they see the heart, what's at the heart of this piece. No matter what people believe politically, they see that love and acceptance is at the heart of this piece. And I mean, how can you argue with that?
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and I will see you tomorrow.